I think we should begin this week with a little bon voyage to one Miss Kirstjen Nielsen, and I'm so happy to hand the talking stick to a friend of ours. You're gonna love him. His name is Bruno Pierotti!
Nice to meet that. Alright guys, the story I'm about to tell is 100% true, except for the parts I made up. This mostly true story starts in the hills of Italy with a baby named Leonardo, last name Michelucci. Now, I know that when you think of Italy nowadays, you think of the eat part of the Elizabeth Gilbert book / Julia Roberts movie. But in 1911, when Leonardo was born, most Italians were dealing with starvation and poverty and organized crime. So Leonardo's parents, much like my great-grandparents, and some of y'all's too, I see you, boarded a boat to America. 2 weeks later, he and his mother arrived in Ellis Island, New York. When they got there, the two were separated from each other, and Leonardo was never seen again. Bummer, the end. Sorry, that was the part I made up. Everything else from here on out is true, all right? You see, in 1911, as many as 10,000 immigrants were going through Ellis Island every day. The arrival hall, built for 5,000, was, as you can imagine, loud and cramped, and people spent 2 to 5 hours waiting to be processed. In other words, Ellis Island, in the turn of the last century, was the Chicago DMV today. Migrants went through a health check, answered 29 questions, and get this, despite the, let's be honest, overly dramatic nickname Island of Tears, only 2% of the immigrants were turned away at Ellis Island, usually because they had visible health issues or didn't bring enough money to start their life in the United States. By the way, adjusted for inflation, that amount was the equivalent of $560 today. The Quota Act of 1921 was still 10 years away, so that's literally all it took. No visas, no papers, just health checks and questions. So after a few hours and a few answers, Leonardo, who was 3 months old, his mother, and his 2 infant brothers immigrated to the US, where they settled in Brooklyn and automatically grew beards. Sorry, that part was also made up. Everything else from here on out is true. In the years that followed, Leonardo Michelucci likely faced racism, hatred, and abuse, being called names like WAP, and generally being heavily discriminated against. Despite all that, he changed his name to Arthur Micheli, enrolled in medical school, and received his degree from the New York Medical College in 1935. By 1971, Arthur had moved to Florida and released the first of 2 textbooks on orthopedic surgery that he authored. They're both out of print, but you can find them at the Chicago Public Library, or if you're an asshole, on Amazon. Those 2 books have a total of 8 reviews, though half of those are less book reviews and more like praise of Arthur Micheli as a doctor, like this one. I really can't write a review of this book as I haven't read it. I can tell you Arthur Micheli was the kind of doctor who could and did save people's lives, including mine. First of all, how badass is that, saving someone's life? Second of all, is this how we're going to be memorialized in the 21st century? Is the Green Mill going to get a Yelp review one day saying, "I've never been to that bar, but I can tell you Bruno Pierotti always held the elevator door open for me." Sorry, that part was the last lie. I hold the elevator door open to no one. You wanted to do a little joggy, all right? It's the least you can do. Back to our story. Before he was writing books and saving lives, Arthur married Rose, the daughter of 2 immigrants from Sicily. They had 1 daughter, Phyllis. Phyllis fell in love too with a fellow army physician named James McHenry Nielsen. Phyllis and James had a child who was likely named after James's grandfather, the North Dakota-born son of Danish immigrants called Kirstjen, spelled Christien, Nielsen. They changed the spelling into its feminine form and named their daughter Kirstjen, spelled, and get ready for this, Kirstjen. Can you imagine how many Starbucks baristas have cried because of that name? Doesn't "it's Kirstjen but with a J" sound like someone is deliberately trying to fuck with you? And fuck with us she did. If you're just returning from the bathroom, here's what you missed. Former Homeland Security Director Kirstjen Nielsen was baby Leonardo's granddaughter. And she must have made him proud that she got into college, got her law degree from Georgetown, and was soon working in George W. Bush's newly minted Homeland Security Council, where in 2006 she oversaw the development and rollout of the 3-ounce bottles of liquid or less rule for airline travelers. Yes! If you've ever felt the thrill of trying to sneak a full-size tube of toothpaste past the TSA at O'Hare, you got her to thank. Fast forward 11 years and Miss Nielsen was in front of Congress saying she wasn't sure if Norway was a predominantly white country, or in California justifying the tear gassing of immigrants at the border, or at the White House defending her now infamous family separation policy. And yet, none of those things were cruel enough for her boss. So last Sunday, Kirstjen with a J of the House Nielsen, first of her name, lady of the 18 immigrants that died in custody, Khaleesi of the Ziploc baggies with your tiny conditioner bottles, Ice Queen, but like ice with all capitals ice. Tear gasser of migrants, and Betsy DeVos of the border. Had to update her LinkedIn profile. Now, before we celebrate, remember this. Kirstjen Nielsen wasn't fired because her Cersei impression was too on the nose. No. She was fired because she wasn't willing to do Trump's bidding at all costs. And now, we don't know who replaced her, but we know it's an even shittier person. Is it going to be Chris Kobach, Alex Jones, Barbecue Becky? Is it even going to be a person? Could it be a pack of wolves stacked on each other, wearing a trench coat and a hat? A reverse Kool-Aid man that says, "Oh yeah," as he builds walls? Could it be a White Walker riding a nice dragon, but like ice with the icy? That joke is so good. This will only get worse. But listen, in a week or two, we'll forget about Kirstjen and her shitty name. But I want us to remember, and remember well, 2 more names and one last story that begins exactly 100 years after that first one. It starts with a Guatemalan kid named Felipe, F-E-L-I-P-E, last name Gomez. Now, I know that when you think of Guatemala, you think of the location for that Rebel base part of the original Star Wars movie in 1977, where like Han Solo, H-A-N-S-O-L-O, flies the Millennium Falcon into the rainforest ruins. That's so cool. Anyway, but in 2011, when Felipe was born, most Guatemalans were dealing with starvation and poverty and organized crime. Last year, Felipe and his father started walking to the U.S. southern border, and 4 weeks later, they were apprehended in New Mexico. While being shuttled between there and El Paso, he might have crossed paths with another migrant kid named Jacqueline, J-A-K-E-L-I-N, last name Callao. Sure, it's likely 8-year-old Felipe and 7-year-old Jacqueline never met, and they won't. The two died in U.S. custody just 3 weeks apart from each other last November. We'll never know if they would have grown up to be surgeons, to write books, to save lives, to move to whatever's left of Florida by then, to be remembered as great doctors in their Airbnb profiles. Or maybe they would have had a granddaughter who would eventually get fired by President Barron Trump. It's gonna happen. Yeah. Because she didn't hate New Zealanders as much as he did. I guess we'll never know. And for that, Kirstjen, you can go fuck FJ UCK yourself. Thank you.